welcome to our fourth workshop on Pranayama. In the first workshop, we looked at diaphragmatic breathing, learning how to breathe down into the low abdomen. The second workshop, we looked at the complete breath, breathing into the abdomen, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders, the collarbones, and also a complete back breath where we start the breath in the upper back, breathe down the back into the belly, and then up through the front. Those are the two primary breathing patterns that you need to be healthy. The third workshop, which we covered last week, dealt with two new breathing patterns, breath of fire and alternate nostril. Breath of fire helps to exaggerate or activate the sympathetic nervous system, raises energy, externalizes your focus. And then the alternate nostril breath balances Eden, Pingala, masculine, feminine, calms, quiets, centers, focuses the mind. Then we looked at how to combine those two to first wake up the mind with breath of fire, and then to balance with alternate nostril, and then using that as a way to lead into meditation. Okay. Today's workshop, fourth in the series, we're going to take a look at the shape of the breath and look at how we can use pattern breathing, changing the ratio of the inhale and the exhale, and what effect that has. When I first started exploring pranayama back in the early 80s, 82, 83, I found some old books in the library on pranayama, and after reading the first few pages, invariably I would set the books down or put them back on the shelf and go about my business, because invariably in books called The Science of Breath by a variety of different authors, all the same title, invariably they would always have the same caution: warning, warning, warning. Pranayama should not be practiced without the supervision of an experienced, qualified teacher. Improper practice may result in, and then it would list all the things that could go wrong. And the last two examples of what could go wrong were insanity and death, okay? Which was about when I'd close the book and put it back on the bookshelf. Being in East Texas back in the early 80s, I realized eventually that I wasn't going to find a qualified pranayama teacher, and so I made the decision to teach myself from a book. And within about 3 months I had my first panic attack. If you've ever had a panic attack and you ask someone, well, what does that feel like? Quite often they'll say, well, it felt like I was going insane, and other people will say, well, it felt like I was going to die. Okay? And because of the warning associated with pranayama that I've read in several different authors, when I had my first panic attack, I asked myself a very simple question: did this come about because of the pranayama? Because I never had one before. So I quit the pranayama, and the panic attack, I'd had two, and I didn't have any more. And after a year or two, I started thinking to myself, I may never find a qualified teacher in East Texas, and how bad could it be? And so I came back to pranayama on my own, but this time with a greater sense of respect. And the biggest thing that I can share with you is the techniques are as dangerous or as safe as the attitude behind them. Okay? If you are trying to dominate the pranayama, if you're trying to get your body to do it, if you're fighting, struggling, working really hard to master the technique, then you are well on your way to having serious side effects. So instead, we want to cultivate an idea where we engage with the pranayama very, very delicately, very, very lightly, but fierce awareness. One pointed attention on what you're doing, fierce awareness, and a very light touch. And if you can't control the breath with the most delicate touch, then you don't. You let the body take back control, you let the body breathe the way it wants to breathe, and you stay calm and centered. And then eventually you decide that you want to try the pranayama again, and you start back in again. And if it starts to cause a tightening, constriction, you let it go, you breathe normally, and you just keep coming back into the pranayama, and then when your body reacts negatively, easing back off, and then coming back in. What you'll find is gradually you'll find that sweet spot where you're able to stay engaged with the pranayama and it's beginning to have a calming, centering, focusing effect. Okay? So that's the main advice I can give to you if you want to start a pranayama practice, and that is to constantly be monitoring how you're reacting to the pranayama, and then adjust the pranayama in such a way that it has the desired result of creating a calm, centered, focused, alert state of mind. So I'll be sharing with you my favorite pattern breath. It's a 4-16-8 breath. But first, let's start by taking a look at just the basics of the controlling the rhythm of our breathing. So the first most important thing is slowing the breath down has an effect that we understand intuitively, but there's also a lot of science behind it, and yogis for thousands of years have been talking about this. When I slow down the breath, it has a healthy effect on my body and mind up to a point. If I slow it down too far, I start getting panic attacks. So there's kind of a sweet spot there. Let me model poor breathing and then better breathing. I'll exaggerate. And you notice that I'm breathing fast into the chest and there's no real pattern there. Then compare that to this. And then breathing in again. So, intuitively, what do you think happens to my heart rate, my blood pressure, and the quality of my consciousness when I deliberately slow down the breath, smooth the breath out? And without reading about it or studying it, you should intuitively understand that it has a calming effect on the mind, calming effect on the body, on the nervous system, on the heart rate, on the blood pressure. So something as simple as smoothing out and slowing down the rhythm of your breathing can have a very profound effect. So when you're starting with your breath, we begin looking at the shape of our breathing. This is the kind of no pattern at all. Okay, if you've ever been working, doing something, also realized that you hadn't been breathing, that's this pattern here, no pattern at all. Very hard on the heart and on the rest of the body. Okay? So now we begin to do something, for instance, breathing on a 4 cycle, in for 4, out for 4. The next thing we want to do is take a look at the transitions and smooth them out. So we're still breathing in for 4 and out for 4, but now there's a more of a wave-like, and instead, we smooth out this cycle, and then we start to go to a 5 or 6 or 7 or an 8. We start to slow the breath down. Okay? Slow the breath down to a little bit. Has a calming effect. Slow it down too much and it causes a fight-flight reaction, which is what we want to avoid. Okay? So those are the basic mechanics. When we begin to explore the breath, first learning how to deliberately make the breath rhythmical, then smoothing out the breath, then stretching the breath. Okay? That leads us to the point when we're ready to start looking at controlling the breath and controlling the ratio between the inhalation, the hold, the exhale, and the hold. So a lot of pranayama is based on an underlying observation that the yogis made millennia ago, and that is that the shape of the breath can also affect sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. It's a basic example. If I breathe in slowly or regularly, and then I force the exhale quickly, this brings up warrior energy. If I do it a little less aggressively, it still brings up warrior energy, but in a more gentle way. So to give you an example of that, a kid getting ready to jump off the high board and has a panic attack and is trying to summon the courage to jump, and they'll breathe like this without even knowing why they're doing it. Long inhale, quick exhale. And they're summoning courage. If we exaggerate it still further, in a karate class, when someone is about to attempt to break a board with their fist or with their foot, quite often you'll hear them vocalize a very sharp, quick exhale, ha! Okay, as they drive the punch. In the Marines, hoo-ah! Again, this forced exhale. So this is something that has been done for millennia to help bring up warrior energy. If, on the other hand, instead of shortening the exhale, if instead we choose to lengthen, so we breathe in and then we stretch out the exhale, it has the opposite effect. So if you'll listen, and then the exhale, so try that for yourself. First, shorten the exhale. Breathe in and force the exhale a little faster. Do that a couple more times. Now, breathe in and then stretch the exhale into a sigh. And you'll notice that as you stretch the exhale, it has a more of a parasympathetic nervous effect, calming, quieting, centering, internalizing. Now we can take that exhale and we can shape it a little bit more carefully to exaggerate the effect. So I'm going to do it first in a way that minimizes the effectiveness and then in a way that maximizes the effectiveness. So the shape is going to be the same. I'm going to stretch out the exhale in both cases. The main thing that's going to change is the quality of the sound. Okay? So the first time, imagine that I was really bored giving this workshop and that I really wished I was somewhere else doing something else and I didn't want to be here. Okay? Listen for that message in the sound of my exhalation. Okay? So listen for it. One more time. So that's kind of our baseline. Now because I stretch the exhale, it has a calming effect, but it also has a depressive feeling to it. So this time, I want you to notice the shape is still the same. I stretch the exhale. This time I change the quality of the sound and listen and see if you can intuitively sense how it affects me differently. Okay? So this time I want you to imagine that I'm 14 years old and I've just fallen in love. Okay? See if you can hear that in the sound of my exhalation. Okay? One more time. So see if you can try that yourself. First, a sigh of disgust. Notice how that feels. And then this time as if you were experiencing the state of being in love. Take a deep breath. And then notice how, even though the shape was the same, just by changing the quality of the sound, that we can have a very different experience with our exhalation. Okay? So now, based on this, you can begin to understand different patterns and what the objective is for any particular pattern. So for instance, a yoga teacher might ask you to breathe in for 4, and then out for 2. And without even doing it, just understanding the mechanics beneath it, you can see that you can anticipate what the result will be, and that is bringing up more energy. And again, if we flip it around to a 2-4 breath, and here the emphasis is on the Ida instead of Pingala, on the feminine energy, on calming, on centering. So now, let's take a look at probably the most common of the breathing patterns. First of all, we're ignoring the top and the bottom. We're just talking about the inhale and the exhale right now. So we can also begin to add the tension. So for instance, I could breathe in for 4, hold my breath for 2, breathe out for 4, hold for 2, and then repeat. This would sound like this. So there are thousands of different patterns that the yogis have explored and experimented with, and the classic one that I'd like to share with you is a 4-16-8. Okay? So we're only going to hold at the top, and we aren't going to hold at the bottom. However, if there's a natural pause, then that is fine. So as you exhale, if your body wants to pause, fine, but if it's ready to breathe in immediately, then start your next inhale. So this is 4-16-8, and then repeating. Okay, 4-16-8. Now you can already tell that because the exhale is twice as long as the inhale, this is going to be a calming pattern. And you'll also notice as you practice this, at the 16 holding at the top, that also has a calming effect. The problem with this pattern is that if you are new to pranayama, it actually has the opposite effect. The very attempt to try and do it creates anxiety and can trigger panic attack. So we don't want to jump right in if you're new to pranayama. You don't want to jump right in, and even if you aren't new but you aren't already very deeply relaxed and focused, if you're a little agitated, it's much better to start off a little easier and then work your way towards this pattern. Okay? So let us start with 4-4-4. Breathe in for 4. Hold your breath for 4. Exhale for 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Now the problem here is that everyone has different breathing rhythms and potential, and so the rhythm that works for one person may be too fast for another or too slow. So you count for yourself. So you could count. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, or you could breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and you can count as slow or as quickly as you need to in order for the pranayama to work for you. What we're holding and what will be universal is the ratio between the inhale, the hold, and the exhale. Now, Jalahandra, the chin lock. So, see if you can firm the abdomen, lift the chest, And then bring not the back of your head back, but the base of your throat back. And then lift your chest towards your chin, sink your chin towards your chest, but then ease up a little bit so that you aren't straining. And then release. Now, for some people that causes some neck issues, so if you can't do that comfortably, if it doesn't feel right, or if it's distracting to you, don't worry about that. Just focus on the breathing. For those of you that are able to, though, we'll engage the chin lock, but only during the hold. Not when air is moving in, not when air is moving out, but when we're holding the breath, we'll have the chin lock. So it'll look like this on a 4 count. So we breathe in, we hold with the chin lock, we release the chin lock and release the exhale. Okay? Now, we'll start with 4, 4, 4, and then we're going to go to 4, 8, 8. We might actually go to 4, 6, 6 and then 4, 8, 8, so that we ease our way into the pranayama a little bit more slowly. Now, keep in mind, the purpose of this is to have a calming effect on the nervous system. If you slow the breath down too much and too quickly, it'll have the opposite effect. It'll cause an agitation of the mind and then the body. And if that starts to happen, immediately breathe normally. Go back to breathing the way your body wants to breathe. Let the body take over. And then after 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 breaths, if you start to feel calm and centered again, you're welcome to rejoin us and pick up and see if you can come back into the pranayama with less or no anxiety. Okay? So starting with 4, 4, 4. Breathe in for 4, finding your own rhythm. Hold with or without the chin lock for 4. And then release for 4. And then repeat. Now going to a 4, 6, 6 pattern. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 6. And then breathe out for 6. One more time. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 6. Breathe out for 6. If you're doing okay, go to 4, 8, 8. Breathe in for 4. Hold for 8. Breathe out for 8. One more time. And now, when you're finished, pause and breathe normally. Now, by the time we get to 4, 8, 8, many people will notice that they're starting to struggle, and there's 2 primary reasons that people have trouble with this pranayama. The first one is the instinct to overinflate the lungs, especially knowing we're about to go to 4, 16, 8, which means you're going to breathe in, hold your breath for 16 seconds. Your instinct is to take in more air so that you'll have more air to hold. And as soon as you open up and lift and expand the chest, it triggers the sympathetic nervous system, raises heart rate, raises blood pressure, stimulates the brain, and now your muscles tighten and you're burning oxygen out of the bloodstream. Okay? So you're using up more oxygen than you would if you were calm and centered. The second problem is that if I overinflate the lungs, it requires effort not to breathe out, which means that as I hold for 16, I'm having to use effort to hold. And again, this is contraindicated. We want to breathe in and then hold our breath without any effort, with a calmness, floating at the top. Okay? So it should be a very calm, floating quality to this hold. So just so you can understand this, I want you deliberately to breathe in too much air and then notice how much effort is required to hold it and how it feels. Breathe in normally, exhale. Now, Breathe in as big a breath as you can. Now hold the breath and notice that the moment you let go of control, the breath is going to start leaving, which means that to hold, you've got to hold the breath by clenching. So the first tip, don't overinflate. Breathe in maybe 80 or 90% as much, and then hold. And notice if there's any effort. If there is, let go of a little bit of air and hold again. Let go of a little bit of air, hold, until you can hold comfortably without effort. Okay? That's your target inhale. A nice deep breath, but not so much that you can't hold it comfortably. And we hold the breath not by tightening the throat, but by maintaining the expansiveness of the container. We hold the position, and the position that created the breath, that drew the breath in. If we hold the position, the breath will reside without effort. Okay? Then we engage the chin lock if you wish to. So that's the first tip, don't overinflate. The second tip is, where people get into trouble is on the exhalation. Okay? And typically, on a count of 8, this is what you'll see. Imagine this is my volume of air that I have in my lungs. I hold, 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 hold. Now I'm ready to start my exhale, and this is what happens for most people. I breathe out, 2, 3, and I'm already running out of air. 4. Now my body's saying breathe in, but I still have to get to 8, 5, 6, and now I'm struggling, trying to control 7, 8, and now the breath gets away from me and I suck the breath in quickly and I'm already losing control of the pranayama. Okay? So here's the key. The battle is fought right here at the transition from the hold to the exhale. All of your control is focused on that moment. I hold, 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 hold. Now I start to breathe out, but I really work hard to breathe out, but ever so slightly. Breathe out. 2, 3. Now look how much air I have left. Now I can start relaxing. 4. Now 5. I can let go. 6, 7, 8, and I relax into the bottom. Now I'm floating at the bottom, which means I can take my next inhale calmly. Okay. So those are the 2 tricks. Put them together and you should have some success with this pranayama. The first one is don't overinflate. Nice deep breath, but hold where you can hold without effort. And then when you start your exhale, fight for control at the very beginning of the exhale, and then relax a little and then surrender into the bottom. And then breathing in again. So we're going to go back to 4-8-8. Practice that a few times. If it's difficult, go to 4-6-6. If it's easy, stay at 4-8-8, and then I'll invite you to go to 4-10-8, 4-12-8, 4-14-8, 4-15-8, 4-16-8, and we're going to very gradually ease our way into the full practice. Your goal is not to get to 4-16-8. Okay? I care less whether you get to 4-16-8 or not. What I am curious about is, can you find the right rhythm? Maybe 4-12-8, or maybe 4-12-7. Can you find the right rhythm where this exercise is a little challenging, but also calming, relaxing, and fun, where you're enjoying the practice without struggling, without fighting? If it's too easy, you'll be bored. If it's too difficult, you'll have anxiety and tension. Okay. Starting with 4-8-8, when you're ready. Breathe in for 4. Hold with or without the lock for 8. And then release for 8. Control the beginning, surrender into the bottom of the exhale. Float at the bottom for a moment, and then when you're ready, start in again. 4-8-8. Find your own rhythm of counting that works for you. After 2 or 3 repetitions, decide whether this is creating a little bit of stress, in which case go to 4-6-6 or 4-4-4. Or perhaps it's becoming increasingly more comfortable and easier, in which case you might begin to hold at the top a little longer, working your way to 4, 10, 8. If that is easy, try 4, 12, 8. The decision to hold longer should be based on how comfortable you are. Measure success by how focused you are and how much you enjoy the practice. 5 or 10 more breaths. If you get all the way to 4, 16, 8 and it's still too easy, count slower. Two or three more rounds. At any point, feel free to breathe normally. Finish your last round. Notice how you feel. So where people get into trouble with this type of pranayama is when they make their goal to get to a certain breathing pattern itself, and then they ignore signs of stress or anxiety or discomfort, or on the other side, it gets easy and they get bored and they keep doing it. So instead of letting this be your destination, think of this as an exercise designed to help you find flow, to be one-pointed attention, to be completely absorbed in what you're doing without any boredom, without any anxiety. So how do you do that? Because we all have different levels of ability, so what's boring for one person is scary for another. So how do we do this? We cheat. How much do we cheat? We cheat just enough to get in the sweet spot, okay? So with that in mind, you can start to participate in almost any advanced pranayama as long as you are taking responsibility to monitor how your body's reacting and then adjusting how you participate with the exercise in order to keep this as a centering, calming experience. Thank you for joining me, and if you have any questions about this practice, please feel free to email me. Namaste.